This is bad. This is really bad.
Wait, what's the box?
No, Em, the line is, "What's in the box?" And you're supposed to scream it at John Doe in the middle of the desert. Today, we're not talking about that movie, however. We're gonna get into 6 horror flicks that'll bend your mind over and give it the old razzmatazz, if you know what I mean. Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm KillJoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. Kicking off our list is 2013's Coherence. The plot description for this one reads, 8 friends at a dinner party experience a troubling chain of events due to the malevolent influence of a passing comet. This one is a metaphysical nightmare. Coherence stars Emily Baldoni, originally Emily Foxler, but took her husband's name in 2013, the same year that this movie came out. Also, in recent news, Emily and Justin both star alongside each other in this year's It Ends With Us. Coherence was directed by James Ward Bierkit, who also has a story credit on the movie Rango. That's how you know Coherence is gonna be good. I freaking love Rango! Unlike a lot of other sci-fi horror movies that I love that also appear on this list, this film does not rely on unimaginable body horror. It's more about how unpredictable the situation becomes. If you like character studies and stories about alternate dimensions that don't feel too close to Rick and Morty, maybe a little bit, you will certainly dig Coherence. I promise this movie is not about turning yourself into a pickle. It delves a lot deeper into the horrors of the what if. Is your life better in another dimension or not? I really enjoyed this movie. It's one of the most accessible from this list as well. You can watch it on Tubi with ads, Peacock, Pluto TV, Amazon Prime. Just like Coherence, however, you're gonna want to go into this next one blind. And I'm gonna beg you right now not to watch the trailer for Triangle 2009. It literally gives away one of the biggest twists of the entire film. Don't watch it. The plot description for Triangle reads, yacht passengers encounter mysterious weather conditions that force them to jump onto a derelict ship, only to have a mysterious killer begin picking them off one by one. While this movie initially starts off as a really unique setup to a slasher film, it turns into the mind-f***y horror movie that you're looking for from this list. It stars Melissa George, who you might remember alongside Josh Hartnett in 30 Days of Night, and Liam Hemsworth. What's really interesting about Liam Hemsworth being in this movie is that in 2009, Cabin in the Woods was also supposed to be released, but got delayed 2 whole years to 2011. That film also stars a Hemsworth, the Thor one, and is slightly similar to this movie in the sense that it starts off as one thing and slowly evolves into something bigger. Cabin in the Woods and Triangle are 2 very different films, but I think if you like Cabin in the Woods for being like so many different things all at once, you're really gonna enjoy Triangle for kind of the same reason. Triangle was directed by Christopher Smith, who also helmed the film Creep. No, not that one. I'm talking about Creep from 2004, which is about a girl being chased by a mysterious assailant through subway tunnels. I haven't seen this movie, but Gina, who likes to hang out around this channel, shout out to you, left me a comment on my Creep video over on the new page talking a little bit about how she thought that I was talking about this movie instead. I have to watch this one because I've heard some very good things about it. See, y'all came into this list video thinking I was only going to recommend 6 movies, but I got this one as a little bit of an extra. Oh, and there's more to come. Triangle features some terrifying visuals that have not left my mind since I first watched this one, and again, I can't really elaborate on these things without spoiling anything about the movie. If you're somebody who is horrified by like impossible cosmic terrors, you will really enjoy this movie. That's all I can say without spoiling it. Ugh! And the twists just keep coming and coming and coming, one on top of the other. That sounded kind of gross out of context. The only big con I have to Triangle is that you really have to buy into what this film is selling you, which at some points can be a stretch. If you're somebody who just can't suspend your disbelief that much, you may not be so into this one. As I am, you might get a little frustrated. It really works for me because all of these weird things are set up right from the beginning. It makes this one perfect for a rewatch. One more shout out to the wonderful people who watch this page. Jesse from Jesse's Storytime Spectacular recommended these last 2 movies to me a long time ago, and I got to watching them finally. They're so good. So thank you, Jesse, for those recommendations. Those last 2 films were a little more obscure, but now let's get into some underappreciated classics. Starting off first with Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys. The plot description for 12 Monkeys reads, traveling back in time isn't simple, as James Cole, played by Bruce Willis, learns the hard way. Imprisoned in the 2030s, James is recruited for a mission that will send him back to the 1990s. Once there, he's supposed to gather information about a nascent plague that's about to exterminate the vast majority of the world's population. But aside from from the manic Jeffrey, played by Brad Pitt, he gets little in the way of cooperation, not least from medical gatekeepers like Dr. Catherine Rayleigh, played by Madeline Stowe. Do I really have to introduce Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt? These are two legendary actors that give incredible performances in this very underrated movie. Madeline Stowe, however, deserves a little bit of the spotlight because she is fantastic in this flick alongside 1993's Blink, an intriguing crime thriller that also stars Laurie Metcalf. That last little bit was for my Scream fans out there. I call this movie underrated, but realistically, anybody who's into like underground 90s cinema has probably seen this one. But if you haven't, it's a must-watch. Like, seriously, if you watch nothing else from this list, put on 12 Monkeys. It's directed by Terry Gilliam, who's probably best known for his sketches from Monty Python, but a couple years after this movie, he also directed Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Terry has helmed a bunch of films in the back half of his career, but these two are easily my favorite. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas might not be as mind-f***y as this film is, but it is certainly as trippy. 12 Monkeys is an intense thriller that focuses on the horrors of getting lost in time. For instance, there's a sequence where Cole, played by Bruce Willis, travels all the way back to World War I in a flash, gets shot, and then gets transported all the way back to 1996 and has to have someone take care of the wound. It's a movie that moves so fast through time with dire consequences. Where Coherence deals with the horrors of becoming a victim of comparison to other versions of yourself, I think 12 Monkeys is more about the horrors of just time travel in general. It's also such a pessimistic look at the future of humanity. Okay, this next movie might even be a little more popular, but again, a must-watch, and that's Videodrome. As the president of a trashy TV channel, Max Wren, played by James Woods, is desperate for new programming to attract viewers. When he happens upon Videodrome, a TV show dedicated to gratuitous torture and punishment, Max sees a potential hit and broadcasts the show on his channel. However, after his girlfriend, played by Deborah Harry, auditions for the show and never returns, Max investigates the truth behind Videodrome and discovers that the graphic violence may not be as fake as he thought. Coming from the king of body horror himself, David Cronenberg, Videodrome was surprisingly not received very well upon its initial release in 1983. What you have to understand about Videodrome is that it may be one of the most ahead of its time movies ever made. It's all about how broadcasts can push an agenda onto someone and blur the lines of reality and fiction. Although yes, this is a very heightened sci-fi horror film, it's more relevant today with its message than it was back in the 80s. Not to get on my soapbox too badly here, but there are a ton of people online that will just spew a bunch of lies and BS and trick people into believing one thing that is truly against their best interests. Videodrome is oddly all about that, but from an 80s perspective, which makes it so unique, so special, and why a lot of critics probably just didn't get it. Videodrome has aged like fine wine and is even more terrifying in a modern context. Even the director knew that some folks weren't going to get this, because David Cronenberg has even stated Videodrome wasn't an exploitation cell. It wasn't an art cell. I don't know what it was. If I don't shut up about Videodrome, I'm just gonna make this whole video about this movie. I love this flick to death, and one day I'm going to cover it over on my new channel, KillJoy Jake Retro. Go subscribe if you haven't already. Some other noteworthy elements to Videodrome that make it a must-watch is that a lot of the practical effects in this movie were made by Rick Baker. Rick is responsible for the excellent werewolf effects in American Werewolf in London. Although Baker had a massive time restraint on this movie, he requested 6 months to get everything done, and that was shoved all the way down to only 2. The effects that were able to be made for this film look incredible. I don't have too many positive things to say about this film's lead, but I absolutely love Deborah Harry, who is of course Blondie. She's surprisingly in a bunch of weird horror movies like John Carpenter's Body Bags alongside this one, and her music f***ing rocks. A reimagining of The Fly is currently in the works, but I think a Videodrome remake would be perfect right now with the threat of AI and news programs that stretch the truth to fit their agendas. There is, however, another David Cronenberg film that feels like a spiritual successor to this movie called Existence from 1999, or Existence as the characters in the movie call it. It's basically Videodrome, but about video games versus television. It's really hard to explain without spoiling either of these movies, but check it out. There's also a fleshy pistol in that movie, just like this one. All right, we hit some classics. Now let's get back to the obscure. And trust me, this next one is really out there. It's called They Look Like People. This film is described as suspecting that people around him are turning into evil creatures. A troubled man questions whether to protect his only friend from an impending war or from himself. Just like Daddy's Head on the last list that we did, talking about the 6 most terrifying underrated horror films from 2024, this is probably my least favorite film on the list, but it is still super exceptional because of its terrifying sequences. there's this really unique effect where they make the faces of the characters that our main character here think are like these evil creatures. It's this distortion effect that is so creepy, and I don't know, it just bugs the f out of me. I don't like looking at it, and it makes this movie something really special. I saw this movie a year after its release, sometime in 2016, 2017, and it still sticks with me to this day. Perry Blackshear wrote, directed, produced, shot, and edited this movie, which gives it this apologetic low-budget feel. That's not supposed to be a diss towards this movie either. That is so impressive for one guy to wear all of those hats. It's a quick 80 minutes too, just like a lot of the other movies on this list, so it won't take up too much of your time if you're not crazy about it. The first time I watched this movie too, I was a little disappointed with the ending, but again, I think if you're picking up on a lot of the themes that this movie is constantly pushing in your face and saying, hey, this is what's actually happening, but we're showing you this instead, you might end up actually loving this really subtle ending. Some, however, may walk away from this film feeling like it was all set up to really no payoff. I personally like to judge movies based on the situation here, and like they made this movie for hardly any money and one guy was doing most of the work here. All of that considered, this is super impressive and effective. Finally, we have one more that you might have missed recently that had a very limited theatrical run during the pandemic, and that is of course Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor. The plot description here reads, Voss, an elite corporate assassin, takes control of people's bodies using brain implant technology to execute high-profile targets. I think most people know Brandon Cronenberg from Infinity Pool from last year because of Mia Goth's Shining Star, but Possessor is just as good and messes with your mind even harder. Our main assassin here, Voss, is played by Andrea Riseborough, who plays the eponymous Mandy in the 2018 film of the same name. This is a much more involved performance than Mandy. She gets to shine a lot more here. She takes over the mind of Christopher Abbott's character, who also gives a great performance. We're gonna see him turn into the Wolfman in the next picture from Lee Winnell. I cannot wait for that at the top of next year. Speaking of existence, Jennifer Jason Leigh reunites with the Cronenberg family here to play the Voss boss. Say that 3 times fast. And last but certainly not least is Sean Bean, who played Boromir in The Lord of the Rings, Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, and Alec in GoldenEye. All 3 of these characters, spoiler alert I guess, died on screen. Now all 3 of those character deaths are incredibly famous and kind of gave Sean Bean a bit of a reputation, turned him into a bit of a meme here online.
One does not simply walk into Mordor.
Without spoiling anything about Possessor, because goddamn I'm right up to the line here, I want you to think about that while you're watching this film. I'm saying that because it's very easy to criticize a certain element of this film, literally a single shot of this movie, and say why the f did they include that? But with that context in mind, it's one of the funniest moments of this very dark film. I just wanted you guys to be in on the joke and not be completely confused by a certain sequence of this movie. The film is an extremely grimy look at corporate espionage and how one can get lost in their own work, slipping away from their own humanity. It's a very well executed film and may just be Brandon's best movie to date, even though Infinity Pool will always have my heart.
Give us the coward, James Foster!
The cinematography done by Kiram Hussein is extremely thoughtful and experimental, just like the other 2 Brandon Cronenberg films he's shot, and the soundtrack from Jim Williams is rightfully creepy as hell. And I can't talk about Possessor without talking about a certain sequence from the unrated cut that must just be a staple of the Cronenberg family of filmmakers. You always have to have a very strange sex scene in all of these movies. If you thought that David's son Brandon wasn't going to deliver with this film, you would be wrong. Sex, drugs, and violence can all be found in this terrifying downward spiral. That's our list, ladies and gentlemen, but let me know which of these 6 movies you've already seen, you want to watch, or are going to watch. And if you have any other mind horror movies that you want to recommend, leave them down in the comments below. Unfortunately, I haven't seen all of them, so leave them as a recommendation for me. This is a give and take kind of thing here. Thank you all for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.